All right, y'all. It's been a minute, but I am back because week 12 has concluded, which means the end of the regular season in all of the various draft best ball championship tournaments. Of course, over the summer, I did a 5-part vlog series documenting my entries into those tournaments. I made a number of predictions. I talked about players I wanted to target. I talked about roster construction, etc., and so forth. And I'm here today to tell you how many of those teams are making it into the playoffs, how I view my season, how those predictions turned out, and ultimately, what's the outlook from this point forward, and how much money can we still make this fantasy football season. So quick recap. We're really talking about 5 different tournaments here. There's the $25 Best Ball Championship. That's really the primary one. $1 million to first place, over 160,000 entrants. We're going to talk about that a lot today. But there was also the $125 Mega Best Ball. Higher entry fee, lower participants, better chance of cashing. Then there was the Mini. That was about 46,000 participants, $5 entry fee, $20,000 going to first place. That tournament was so successful, it filled up early. They came out with a mini best ball tournament, number 2, exact same structure. And then draft surprised us. We started the season, we thought it was over. They came out with a week 5 forward tournament, which I was really interested in. And you're going to find out in a minute was actually very fruitful for me. I'm glad they came out with that because it really helped my metrics this season. But regardless of the tournament we're talking about, they really all follow the same structure, which is that whenever you drafted, whether it be back in May, June, July, August, or in the week 5 tournament, once the season even started, you were dropped in randomly with 11 other competitors. And everybody's goal, that's a 12-person league. You had to win your 12-person league. First place. If you don't get first place, your season's over, your money's gone. That's it. That's all she wrote. But if you finished in first place, you are now proceeding into the playoffs in all of these tournaments, which means you are guaranteed to cash. You will at least min cash in each of these tournaments, and you've got an outside shot at the top money. So let's go ahead and break that down by tournament, how many people we started with and how many people are remaining. $25 Best Ball Championship Tournament, 161,244 original entrants. Today, 13,824 remain. All remaining teams will cash. That equals $3.5 million in total prizes. Minimum cash at this point is $60. And of course, top prize, $1 million. In the Mega, there were 4,608 original entrants. Today, 384 remain. All will cash. $500,000 up for grabs. Minimum cash is $500. First place takes home a cool $100K. In both of the minis, exact same format, 46,080 original entrants, 3,840 entrants remain. All teams will cash. $200,000 up for grabs. Minimum cash at this point is $20. First place takes home $20,000. Last but certainly not least, the week 5 tournament, 8,628 original entrants. Today, 768 remain. All teams will cash. Minimum cash, $100. That's a nice min cash for a 33 entry fee. I'm happy about that. And first place will take home $50,000. So before we talk about how many of my teams are amongst those remaining, let's recap the top things that I got right and things I got wrong this offseason. And we'll start with the latter because there are definitely some things I was just dead wrong about over the summer. Check it out. I think the Chargers are vastly underrated. Gambling, over-unders, certainly in fantasy. So I'm taking Melvin Gordon often in round 1. As often as I can get Jared Goff, I will. So if he ends up being top 5, top 3 running back, he is an exceptional value at this point. Trey Quinn, this is a player from the Washington Redskins. Trey Quinn flashed towards the end of last year. You know, there's really no great wide receivers on the Washington Redskins. For that reason, we're going to take quarterback Dwayne Haskins, wide receiver Trey Quinn, and running back Chris Thompson. And I like Chris Herndon, the tight end. He's been suspended, but he was highly productive last year. This will also be his second year. I like jet stacks. You can get him at the very end of your draft. It's incredibly inexpensive, and just hope for the best, man. A tight end that I have a lot more high hopes for and I feel a lot more confident in, Jack Doyle, a la Baker Mayfield to Odell Beckham Jr. Are they going to put up video game style numbers this year? Probably. Mitch Trubisky has improved in each of his first 2 seasons. From a throwing standpoint, he's always been fantasy viable because he can run. But I think that this is the year they put it all together, and that is an offense that you want to buy shares of. Yeah, not my proudest moments. But you know what? Actually, I think my biggest mistake this year actually had nothing to do with specific players. It had to do with roster construction. You know, in 2018, I entered a handful of these tournaments, not nearly as many as this year. But in those tournaments, I took 3 quarterbacks, 3 tight ends, and then I filled in the rest of my roster with running backs and wide receivers. I actually talked about this in one of the videos. This year, I made a conscious decision decision to go down to 2 quarterbacks and 2 tight ends because I wanted those extra spots for the wide receiver and running back so that maybe I could find someone at the back end of the draft that was being overlooked that could really help me towards the end of the year. That ended up being the wrong decision in 2019. There was just so much turnover at the quarterback position. I ended up with a handful of these teams that I sort of think of as ghost ships just floating through the night because I had teams limping to the finish line that were putting up zeros at quarterback because the 2 guys that I had taken were either benched, injured, suspended, retired, etc. For one reason or another, there just was nobody playing in that spot. Same thing at tight end to a lesser degree. Quarterback this year was particularly tumultuous. So I don't know, maybe that was right. Maybe it was just bad luck. Maybe it was wrong. I'll have the whole offseason this year to make a decision on that and decide what I want to do in 2020. But I can definitely tell you it hurt me this year. However, there were also some things that I was ahead of the curve on and I felt that I got right earlier than the field. So let's check those out. The top things I was right about going into this season. And I can feel in these early drafts, a lot of people are shying away from the Ravens. They're not taking any players because they just don't want any part of this offense. But we've seen this time and time again. When you have a quarterback that has the running ability like Lamar Jackson has, it tends to open up a lot of avenues for the running game as a whole. And I think Mark Ingram will be the beneficiary of that. Bills are fun to watch. They're a great fantasy team. They might even be a great NFL team. We'll see as the season progresses. But if you put Josh Allen together with John Brown, the receiver that is built for this quarterback, deep balls all day, they're going to have some monster weeks. Mark my words. There are monster weeks coming between JB and Josh Allen by now because the window is going to close soon. OJ Howard is a fade only because I'm so high on Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I just don't think all 3 of those guys are going to have enough production to be top tier at their position. So for me, OJ was the odd man out. Marvin Jones. Now the Kenny Golladay hype train is real. It has left the station, but I'm of the camp that believes Marvin Jones could and might even be likely to outperform Golladay this season, even though you can get him multiple rounds later. Darren Waller, knock on wood if you're with me. I love that guy's story. I started drafting him in August while I was watching Hard Knocks, as many of you did as well. So yeah, we got some things right. We got some things wrong. Of course, that's all par for the course and part of this game. But you know what? At this point, none of that actually matters. All that matters, regardless of how they got there, is how many of these teams are proceeding into the playoffs and going to make some money for us. Before I reveal that number, let's talk about what my goal was going into the season. Out of these 197 teams, I am hoping that 24 or more make the playoffs. That would be just over 12%, which I think would be very successful. If you just got 1 out of every 12 in, meaning on average, the average player should get 1 out of every 12 leagues because there's 12 competitors, that would be just over 8%. So I'm trying to go 1.5 times that. And of course, the more the better. Drum roll, please. 12.5%. We hit it right on the head. We got the exact goal that we set out to do this season. I don't think it happened the way I expected it to. And that week 5 tournament really helped in this regard because I got 4 out of my 20 teams advancing into the playoffs in that tournament, which marked 20%. Here's my other breakdowns. You can see here that the Best Ball Championship, the $25 entry, is where I performed the least well at only a 9% clip. I guess that's to be expected. It is the higher entry fee, probably a little sharper crowd. The mini, the first one, which was actually pretty early in the summer, I did quite well at. The second mini, not quite as well. And the mega, only 1 entry, second place. Yeah, I got second, which sucks. $500 minimum cash if I would have just finished in first. You know how many teams I got in second place in all these tournaments? No one cares. I know no one cares. I'm not even going to go into it. I know we all have these stories. And you know what? I'm not going to complain because I actually had 2 teams that were in third place going into week 12, and they jumped 2 spots to finish in first. So that's how this goes. Of course, I got caught from behind in some of them. I was the one catching up in others. But at the end of the day, we have 27 teams alive and ready to go make some money over the coming weeks. So here's where it gets interesting. And, I was aware of this throughout the drafting process. Of course, there are always players each and every year that are standouts, that are going to lead a number of teams to success that fantasy season. This year, that was clearly Christian McCaffrey. I was underweight on Christian McCaffrey. I took a whole lot of Saquon Barkley whenever I had the opportunity. That, in retrospect, was a mistake. I did not have a lot of Christian McCaffrey this year. Same goes for Lamar Jackson. A lot of people were looking to draft him early. They were right about that, and kudos to them. I don't have a lot of Lamar Jackson either. But this is where it gets kind of weird because now that we've whittled it down and we're all competing against each other and there's going to be a lot of similar players, this now takes on sort of a GPP, if you will. tournament structure as if you were entering the Millie Maker, on any given weekend, because these players like Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, etc., are going to be very highly owned, and for good reason. They've had stellar seasons. But I have a few players that have squeaked through that I'm kind of surprised made it through onto so many teams. They're going to be sort of my long shot contrarian play, if you will. So let's go ahead and look at that and my player ownership across my 27 remaining teams. So this is all combined. This is just a list of players I'm going to be rooting for. I didn't break it down by tournament. I don't think that's necessary for this video. And we'll start at quarterback, where admittedly I am in some trouble because my highest owned player is Matt Stafford with 9 shares. Now, Matt Stafford is a player I took at the very end of drafts. He's a long-term veteran. Nobody was excited to take him. He actually really far outperformed his ADP until he had broken bones in his back. So I'm limping in with 9 shares of Matt Stafford. He's probably not going to play again this year. There's an outside chance, but it's unlikely. Same thing with Marcus Mariota, man. 5 shares of Marcus Mariota. Of course, he's been benched for months at this point. After this, there's a couple more players that make sense. I've got 5 shares of Jameis, 5 shares of Sam Darnold, who's turned it on here post-mono in weeks 11 and 12. Helped get a couple of my teams in at the last minute. Phillip Rivers, Jimmy G, Russ, Jared Goff, Josh Allen, etc. I'm kind of spread out at quarterback. Once you get past Stafford and Mariota, I also want to be clear that my teams with Stafford and Mariota, they are the backup quarterback. So those were my guys that I was trying to get through bye weeks with. Mariota, certainly disappointed. Stafford exceeded expectations. But those guys are generally going to be backing up the Jameses, the Darnolds, the Rivers, the Jimmy Gs, etc. Like I said at the beginning, quarterback is a liability for me. It is what it is. That's what I'm working with going into the playoffs. We're going to get a little bit stronger as we go to some of these other positions. Looking at running back, and this is a prime example of what I was talking about from a contrarian play standpoint. Okay, so I have 12 shares remaining of Mark Ingram. Makes sense. It's a player I targeted all summer. He's had a great season. It all adds up. Next up, Royce Freeman. Okay, that one's a little bit like, how did that happen? How'd you get 9 tournament teams with Royce Freeman into the playoffs? Let's put a pin in that, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. CMC, again, 9. I didn't take much McCaffrey. So that 9 represents almost the entire ownership I had of Christian McCaffrey. I shudder to think how many times I took Saquon Barkley. Had I taken McCaffrey instead, how many of these teams would be in the playoffs? It would probably be a ridiculous number, but that's all woulda, coulda, shoulda, and we're not going to spend any time on it. I have 9 shares of McCaffrey, and they're all in the playoffs. Dalvin Cook, very similarly, a player I targeted all summer. Also 9 shares of Dalvin, who's had an extraordinary season. So here's where it gets interesting. Mark Ingram, McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook are all going to be very heavily owned in this tournament. I have to imagine. They've had great years. They're going to have led a number of teams into first place finishes, and they're going to be my competition now the rest of the way. So where Royce Freeman gets interesting, I have to imagine he's going to be very lightly owned amongst the field. So of course, there's no real reason to think that Royce Freeman is going to blow up in the coming weeks. But if he could, if there was some path to him having high production in week 13, 14, 15, and beyond, that would be very beneficial to my remaining teams. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Let's move on to wide receiver. This was the position I felt the best about all summer. Once the season started, it became very evident that my middle and late round receivers were going to have to be what carried my teams because that's where it seemed that I did the best. And that really proved out over 12 weeks. So I have 18 shares of John Brown. I have 15 shares of Marvin Jones and identical 15 shares of Michael Gallup. Those are the 3 receivers I talked about all summer long. They had a number of great weeks together. They were all undervalued from an ADP standpoint. And, none of them are mega stars, certainly, but they've been very consistent and solid this year, which has helped the majority of these teams get into the playoffs for me. Beyond that, A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf, 2 rookie wide receivers, both out of Ole Miss, both outperformed their ADP, I would say, on average. Christian Kirk, Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp. Here's my favorite, Trey Quinn. You already saw my thoughts on him earlier. I love the guy coming into the season. That one did not work out. Neither did Marquise Lee. He didn't get on the field this year in Jacksonville, and that was unfortunate. But Deebo Samuel, been turned it on recently. Curtis Samuel, Chris Godwin, so on down the list. This is my wide receiver core, but it's all really going to hinge on JB, Marvin Jones, and Michael Gallup at the top. How are they going to do over the next 4 weeks? Moving on to tight end, Jack Doyle, my highest owned tight end. He was also my highest owned overall. The vast majority of those shares were taken when Andrew Luck was still in the picture. Of course, that changed when Andrew Luck retired, but nothing you can do about it. Much like Matt Stafford and Mariota, he is primarily a backup tight end for me. But if he could find some production in the coming weeks, much like Royce Freeman, it would be very beneficial to my team. After that, you got George Kittle, Mark Andrews, Mike Gesicki, who's had a couple good weeks recently. So has Kyle Rudolph. Evan Ingram, man, really a disappointment. He started off the season so strong, but once again, just cannot stay on the field. Austin Hooper, similar. He was on the field longer this year and performed great when he was, but he's been hurt as of late. Ertz, Jared Cook, Kelsey, Waller, Jimmy Graham, so on down the line. Kittle, Andrews, I think those are probably going to be my bread and butter. But, I do have some contrarian plays here. Some of these guys could continue to have their production in the coming playoff weeks. I would love nothing more than to get one team, just one team, to week 16, especially if it was in the best ball championship where we have $1 million at the top. But what a Sunday that would be, because there's 27 remaining entries by the time we get to week 16 in that tournament. 27th place takes home $3,000. First place, $1 million. Like, what a sweat that would be. The variance between 3,000 and 1 million, all riding on 16 games over the course of 2 days. I'd love to be in that position. And you can bet that if I am, I will be back here shooting a video and sharing my path that got me to week 16. I would love to be in a position to do that. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at 12Fluid, where I will continue to update week by week how I'm doing in the playoffs and how many of my teams are progressing. If you haven't played draft yet, I don't know what you've been doing, but clearly I've been talking about this for 6 months now. It's my favorite format of fantasy football. They're also doing fantasy basketball. They have some awesome Thanksgiving tournaments for the Turkey Day football this week. Get in there. If you haven't signed up before, use promo code 12Fluid. That helps support this channel. It will also get you a sign-up bonus, and you'll find me in there drafting in the Turkey Day tournaments, as well as you can track my progress in all of the various best ball championship tournaments. In the meantime, a very happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. I hope you're able to enjoy it thoroughly. And if you're still alive in these tournaments, best of luck to you the rest of the way. Just don't knock me out, man. I'm trying to get to week 16. As I said, if that happens, I'll be back here to shoot another video. If not, you can track my progress on Twitter, and we'll be back in 2020 to do this all again with all the knowledge we learned this year. Thank you guys for tuning in. Happy Thanksgiving.